Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. This is Irene's DIY Addiction. You may have seen those 4 gingerbread houses tutorials already. They got viral this year and so many DIY bloggers paint wooden houses brown and decorate them with puffy paint. The problem with those 4 gingerbread houses is that they don't actually look real. They are pretty when you look at them at a distance, but when you look up closer, you can immediately tell they are not real gingerbread and just painted wood. I want to show you the technique how to make those wooden houses look like real gingerbread even when you look up really close. This is super simple and affordable technique, no fancy materials needed. Sounds impressive? Well, let me show you how to do this. First of all, you'll need wooden houses to work with. You can actually choose any type you like. Tiny houses to make Christmas tree ornaments, medium-sized houses to decorate a shelf or a mantle, or even a bigger and more detailed house like the one I'll assemble here for a real impact. You can even make your own houses out of cardboard. It is also fine for making a gingerbread house. They offer wooden house at Michael's, and I've also found some really awesome options online. We'll leave you the links in the description box below as usual. If you want to keep it simple, be sure to choose rather plain shapes without intricate details. You are going to cover the house with homemade gingerbread dough, and all that balconies, lattice and the like will make this work a little more complicated than if you use simple shapes. On the other side, you will not have to decorate those intricate houses a lot. They are great as they are. So all you'll have to do is to outline the windows, the wall edges and the roof with just a little decoration. So be sure to keep this in mind before you start. What you would prefer, spending more of your time on covering the houses with the dough, or using simple shapes for covering them quicker and then dedicating on decoration. It's real fun to assemble those houses actually. The big house I found online is from our local company and it looks super cute. It is called the Hansel's house, so I think it will make a superb gingerbread house despite the fact it's a little tricky to cover. Once you're finished with assembling the houses, it's time for my secret recipe. It's super simple. All you need is white glue and hardwood flour or hardwood sawdust, whatever you want to call it. I'm using oak sawdust. It's super fine grade, so really looks like flour. All you want to do is to mix some white glue with the sawdust till you get nice and sticky dough. And you're good to go. Wood sawdust creates that texture really similar to the gingerbread. Be sure to use fine grade for this look, like the sawdust you get from a sander, not a jigsaw, if you know what I mean. You want to cover the house's surface with a thin layer of this dough. A rough layer is fine, don't be too meticulous here. And once it's finished, pour your finger into white glue and even out the dough surface with it. You will get slightly uneven finish that looks exactly like real gingerbread when dry. The process is rather simple, as you can see. Here is just a couple of tips. Be sure the dough is not too thick or too thin. I can't give you the exact recipe here, it's more of trial and error method actually, as white glue is different and sawdust is different too. Just make a batch and try it. The dough that's too thick doesn't stick to the house well and tends to fall off while you work. This is what happened to me in the very beginning. This means you need to add a little glue to make it more soft and sticky. If it's too thin, you will find it hard to even out the surface in the very end as it gets too watery. Then try adding more sawdust to the mixture to make it a little thicker. You want it to be like wood filler viscosity actually. Spreadable but not too runny, so just add more glue if it's too thick or more dust if it's too soft till you like how it spreads and sticks to the surface. The good thing here is that even if the viscosity is not perfect, it will still work for making the good layer. You'll just spend a little more time for spreading or drying it, and if you don't like how it looks in the end, you can always apply the second thin layer to get it look right. For spreading the dough, you may want to use just your fingers, and this works just fine with simple shapes. Just be sure to wear gloves while you work. You may also want to use a palette knife or a spatula to keep your hands clean and to be able to reach all the corners and hard to get areas, although it is a slightly longer way to apply it. I haven't tried sawdust made of other types of wood for this project. Actually, I already had this package of oak flour on hand, bought for another project, and I thought it would work great for simulating gingerbread. I'll leave you the links to the oak flour, which I found on Amazon. You can also make the sawdust at home by simply sanding an oak plank with a sander and using the dust from its collecting bag afterwards. You don't need much material actually. I used like 8 tablespoons maybe for all of the houses, including the biggest one. So you're gonna need just a couple of tablespoons of the sawdust to cover a medium-sized house completely. This is absolutely doable at home if you don't want to buy anything. I'm not sure if pine sawdust would work the same. I think it will make a lighter hue than you would like for gingerbread, but you can always give it a try. Anyway, gingerbread may have different hues. And be sure to buy or make fine-grade sawdust that looks like flour without bigger particles. To mimic the gingerbread well, you want to make all the edges and the corners a little rounded. It is not always easy to do at once, so I finished, for example, the walls first without trying to make rounded corners, and after the walls were dry, I've added more fresh dough over the corners and shaped them as I liked. And I did the same with the roof edges. Finished the roof first and then applied more dough to the very edge to make it thicker and more rounded. With little houses you may not need this, but with the bigger ones you will see this helps make it a perfect faux gingerbread look. And the last tip, you don't need to cover the whole house at once. Actually, it's a little tricky and you may ruin the prepared surface easily while working over the next wall. So just make like several walls at once and the roof after the walls are dry. I've been working over the biggest house for like 3 days like this, making breaks wherever I wanted. This is completely fine for this technique. The only thing is to use the whole bunch of the prepared dough at once, as it dries pretty quickly. So don't make too much. A couple of tablespoons of the sawdust is just enough to use before you get tired. After I've covered the houses, I've left them for one more day to dry completely, and the last step is to decorate them. You want to use the white outliner paint or puffy paint to add dimension to the houses and imitate sugar icing. I also have a recipe of homemade outliner paint. This is much cheaper than buying an outliner, as you will need quite a lot if you make many houses. I used 3 full tubes of white outliner for all the houses I made. Keep this in mind when ordering, especially if you're making a bigger house. You want to start with outlining the windows, the doors, as well as the house contours, the edges of the walls and the roofs, like on a real gingerbread house. If you use outliner paint, the line may look too thin to you, then you can just cut off the tip a little to get thicker lines. This works for outlining the house edge as well. Somehow it looks prettier than thin lines. Here I would also recommend working with breaks, as you may ruin the already finished pattern with your fingers pretty easily by smearing the paint. This is what happened right here. It's rather hard to correct as white paint gets into the dough immediately, so be careful and make breaks, leaving the houses to dry before you continue. If your house has no pre-cut doors or windows, you can just draw them. Here you can definitely see why choosing a more elaborately made house is definitely worth the effort. After just outlining all those windows and the doors and the balconies, it looks great even without making any images on it. I feel like it would look amazing with windows filled with UV resin, like caramel filled. Somehow I thought about this only after the house was assembled, which is a pity. This would definitely add to the whole look. So if you know how to work with UV resin, definitely consider making faux caramel windows and fill them before the assembly. After the main lines are finished, you want to work with the roof. I tried several ways of decorating the roof. You may draw the crisscross pattern, this is actually what I liked the best, and used it for bigger houses later. I tried drawing the tiling, but somehow it ended up being a little messy. And when I recreated it on a bigger house, it ended up being rather uneven. Maybe outlining the tiles with a pencil first would help making it more precise. I added little trefoils inside each tile to make it look better. Drawing this is super simple. You want to draw a dot first and stretch it up a little, and then add 2 more dots on each side and stretch them up to meet at the same point. I also tried making crisscrosses and tiles but painting them with dots. This creates subtle pattern and I really like how it looks. Painting with dots also allows you more control and therefore you can keep it really neat. And I've made one of the houses with the snowflakes all over the roof, therefore making each of the tiny houses look different. As I have already told you, I've liked the crisscross pattern the best, and therefore I used it for 2 more houses, including the biggest one. It worked perfect for the medium-sized house too. As for the biggest one, I felt like it looked a little too plain. So I added little trefoils in the middle of the rhombs and flowery stripes on one of the little roofs. Finally, it's time for decorating the walls. For the tiny houses, this was pretty simple. I just played with the dot pattern to decorate the corners, added trefoils, hearts and snowflakes here and there. For the medium-sized house, I've tried to follow the pattern of a nice picture of a house found on Pinterest. This is, I think, the best way to make it if you don't know which pattern to choose. And don't be afraid your painting is not perfect. The real gingerbread houses are actually supposed to look imperfect. This is part of the charm. And for the Hansel house, I felt like it didn't need a lot of embellishments. Actually, it was so pretty already, so I just drew 4 tree branches and added dots along the edges, just as on the other houses. And once all the houses are dry, they are ready for display. You may want to tie little red bows onto the hanging ornaments. By the way, you can do gingerbread cookie ornaments using the same technique and wooden bases. You can put fairy lights inside bigger houses and place them onto a shelf or a mantle. They will look gorgeous in any arrangement. You may want to decorate it heavily or add just a few embellishments, and no one will ever tell these houses are not real. I'm really obsessed with them. They look so cute, both as hanging ornaments and shelf decor, and if you make faux gingerbread cookies using this technique, they will make adorable little gifts. Just be sure to warn they are not real. I hope you liked today's video. I wanted to remind you I have the whole playlist all about making Christmas decor and Christmas ornaments. We'll link it down below, as well as all the materials which you will need for today's tutorial. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in my next one. Bye!